Hey, good afternoon. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm excited to announce the first piece of legislation that I have submitted as a member of the New York State Assembly is to fix the broken state school aid formula, which has severely shortchanged Rockland County schools for many years. For too long, Rockland County schools have been treated like schools in upstate New York as opposed to Long Island and New York City. And it has cost us millions of dollars in direct state aid that we should be getting. You know, we pay the second highest property taxes in America right here in Rockland County, and it's primarily driven by our school taxes. And we have great schools, great teachers, and we're happy to pay for it. But we should be getting our fair share of state school aid. So this legislation that I'm announcing today is legislation that for many years teachers in our community, school administrators, school boards have been calling for a fix to the regional cost index. I am happy to announce that this legislation would change the regional cost index for Rockland County, Westchester County, and other counties in the Hudson Valley from 1.314 to 1.425. This change alone would add $11 million in direct state aid this year, in this year's budget, if we were able to get this changed in the budget and going forward. That's a lot of money, and it would offset the budget cuts that we're projected to receive for 7 of the 8 schools in Rockland County. Currently, under the governor's executive budget and the school aid runs, we're expected to have $6.7 million cut from 7 of our 8 schools, and it's unacceptable. And it's something that I ran on, it's something that I've talked about extensively. We need to fix this formula. We need to make sure that Rockland County schools are getting our fair share. And as I said, this one change, would bring over $11 million in additional aid to our schools when they need it most and when our taxpayers need it most. This has been a difficult and challenging year for so many of our residents, and the last thing we need to do is raise taxes unnecessarily. This direct state aid would help offset that and alleviate the projected budget cuts from New York State to our local school districts. And that's why I've put this legislation forward, and I'm proud to be joined by some of our representatives here in the Pearl River School District, as well as the Rockland County Teachers Association. So with that, if anybody has anything to add, please feel free to speak. Otherwise, we'll open it up to questions.
We do appreciate, we certainly appreciate the initiative and the support that the Assemblyman is willing to give to our cause. It's a county-wide cause, and at this juncture, schools and school districts sorely need this kind of support. We're very grateful for it. Thank you.
Can you just state your name, please?
I'm Marco Pocantesta, Superintendent, Pearl River.
Okay, any questions?
Yeah, how exactly is this going to benefit students and teachers? I know you said $11 million will be going to schools that, you know, they need it most, a lot of, you know, PPE and things like that, but like if you were to name like just a couple things that would directly help students and teachers, how is this going to exactly affect them?
Well, $11 million is a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I think what we've seen over the past few years, even in last year's budget, a number of our school districts received direct state school aid cuts, and this will alleviate that. Right now, projected, we're supposed to have a $6.7 million cut in state school aid to 7 of our 8 districts. This would add $11 million in direct state aid. It would alleviate property taxpayers from having to pick up the difference. Obviously, our labor costs continue to rise per contracts that we have. The cost of trying to deal with COVID over the last 11 months has been absolutely suffocating to so many of our school districts as they try to fund these necessary purchases of PPE, dealing with HEPA filters, etc. So this type of additional funding is critically important to make sure that our schools can continue to operate and continue to fully fund the education for our children. So this is critical for Rockland County. It's critical for each and every school district in Rockland County. and that's why I've put this legislation forward.
What's the next step with this?
So I've already reached out to a number of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle. The Hudson Valley is very bipartisan in its representation. Rockland County is 2-to-1 Democratic county in terms of enrollment, and yet we have a Republican county executive. 3 of the 5 towns are Republican. So this is something that's bipartisan. I think almost every one of my colleagues agree with the need to change the state school aid formula. I've put this legislation forward. I will be looking for additional co-sponsors in the Assembly and working with my colleagues to have one of them introduce it in the Senate as a same-as bill, so that we can move it forward and advance it. And it's something that I think every resident, every taxpayer in Rockland and in the Hudson Valley, I encourage them to call my colleagues, call my office, offer your support, and encourage folks to support this legislation.
The only other question is, I followed your campaign from the beginning. You talked about this many times, and now that you're following through, can you just talk a little about the process of just getting into Albany and kind of putting your agenda into motion?
Well, look, this is something I've talked about for many years. We pay the second highest property taxes in America in Rockland County. It's a great place to live. I want to make sure that people can afford to live here. And so increasing direct state aid is one of the best ways to do that, to help alleviate some of the costs on a local level and alleviate some of the costs for our school districts, so that we're not constantly going back to the taxpayers to help provide the funding. We need to be getting our fair share of state aid. So this was a bill that I talked extensively about. I'm proud that this is my first piece of legislation that I've introduced, and it's fulfilling a promise that I made to the voters when they elected me. All right. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.